As parents and as individuals, how is it that life and death issues often end up in the hands of our courts?
Should doctors be able to make a determination about life and death of a patient without any regard for the legal consequences? How does it affect a family? There are human dimensions to these very difficult questions. We'll talk with people who've met the challenges.
I'm Arthur Miller. What are the legal rights of parents of a child with severe disabilities? And is the courtroom the best place to decide the fate of that child?
I'm Dr. Tim Johnson, who is the doctor most responsible to in these cases, the patient, the family, the courts, or the Hippocratic Oath.
Good morning. I'm Tim White, and welcome to a very special Good Day. Issues of life and death and how they end up in a courtroom. Do parents have a right to determine whether a child lives or dies? Do doctors have a right to go beyond a parent's wishes or a patient's wishes in determining what lengths should be taken to keep someone alive? And what if parents decide that there should be no treatment at all for a child or something other than what the doctors recommend? These days, right to life has sometimes meant a rather narrow legal thing, but today it's going to have a much broader base. We're going to be talking about not only the right to life, but the right to live.
One of the earliest cases to highlight the conflict between a doctor's recommended treatment and a parent's choice happened right here in Massachusetts. Back in 1979, Chad Green was 3 years old and losing a battle against leukemia. A Massachusetts General Hospital doctor ordered chemotherapy treatment, acknowledging that the chances of success were about 50%. Diane and Gerald Green rejected those odds. They believed that the therapy was doing more harm than good.
All we ever saw when he was on that alone was that he lost weight, he didn't eat, he either had diarrhea or constipation, and a person's body physically cannot go on bringing nothing in, meanwhile expelling everything else.
They stopped the chemotherapy and were taken to court by their doctor. The court sided with the doctor and ordered the treatment resumed, and custody of the child was turned over to the state. The Green family, instead, fled to Mexico, where they sought out the controversial Laetro treatment. Chad Green died of leukemia in October of 1979. His parents were held in contempt of court, but charges were dropped on the grounds that they had suffered enough. The doctor had gone to court for what he felt were the best interests of the child. The parents fought for what they thought was best. How does the court system handle these cases? Are the parents' rights always given the backseat to medical opinion? And doesn't the quality of life for the terminally ill child play any role in the decision-making process? For the parents of baby Jane Doe, the quality of life is everything. The current baby Jane Doe case brings back much of the agony of the Chad Green story. However, the parents aren't fighting the hospital. Instead, a complete stranger brought them into the courtroom. Their child suffered multiple birth defects, including spina bifida, and after consulting doctors and religious leaders, they decided not to have their baby undergo life-prolonging surgery. Attorney Lawrence Washburn, on behalf of baby Jane Doe, took them to court.
To be forced into the courts by these so-called right-to-life advocates has been the ultimate intrusion into our lives.
They're not doctors, they're not the parents, and they have no business being in our lives like this.
They can talk about life, but they can't feel what we feel for our baby.
While a New York lower court judge agreed with the pro-life people, the New York Supreme Court sided with the parents and urged only minor surgery. Baby Jane Doe currently lives at home with her parents. Her life expectancy is unknown.
Joining us this morning are two people who share many of the feelings, much of the anguish of the Greens and of the parents of baby Jane Doe. Maureen Gallagher is here. Maureen's daughter, Mary Ann, was born with spina bifida, which is a disease, not a disease, it's a congenital birth defect in which there's a space in the spine and the child therefore has some level of disability later on. Is that a fair way to describe it, Maureen?
Yes. Spina bifida results in varying degrees of paralysis, which can result from possibly just minor paralysis in the lower legs to paralysis from much higher level, like from the waist down.
We'd like to welcome to Patty Steering, who joins us this morning because her daughter, Amber, at 3½, was diagnosed as having a brain tumor, and you chose an alternate method. You didn't go along with the chemotherapy and radiation. We'll talk about that in just a moment. Maureen, first to you. When you gave birth to Marianne, and spina bifida was obviously a part of the birth, part of her health situation, was there any doubt in your mind what you were going to do?
Well, first of all, you have to realize I had never heard of spina bifida and I had no background. So we basically had to rely on the recommendations by the special doctors who treat children with spina bifida, and it was recommended to us that she had surgery within 24 hours in order to prevent a more severe degree of disability.
Now, we should point out that spina bifida is the second most common birth defect among children and the leading crippler of children. Now, you were in the Boston area, and the doctors recommended treatment for Marianne, but that might not have been the case if you had been somewhere else, right?
Possibly, if a pediatrician isn't familiar with the current surgical techniques, there is a possibility that they may think of spina bifida as something in the past where there wasn't a lot of potential for the children. Like Marianne right now is doing enormously well. She's walking with crutches and braces, and she attends school and does most everything other children do.
There she is right there. She's in nursery school now. She's 5. What's her personality like?
She's extremely sociable. She loves people, and people really enjoy her. She genuinely has a good time with people.
And it's hard to know as she gets older what her level of disability will be.
Right. The thing with spina bifida, it's very hard to tell very early on when you're making the decision how well a child will do. I know many parents that people have said, well, the doctors had said, well, this child's going to be mentally retarded, it's going to be paralyzed from the waist down, and the child indeed has not had those problems.
Traditionally, spina bifida children would die.
Right. But now with the surgery to close the back and with a shunt to help with the hydrocephalus that many of the children have, most of the children have normal intelligence and can ambulate to some degree.
Patty, your story is extraordinary. You noticed a tumor on Amber's head, and will you take it from there?
Well, I discovered a small lump behind Amber's ear in August of '79. My first thought was, oh my God, cancer. And I didn't even know anything besides how to spell the word. I took her over the next 6 months all over the state of Connecticut to various doctors, telling them, this is cancer, please biopsy it. I had various responses such as, don't worry, lots of kids get lots of lumps and bumps, etc. In March of '80, she fell and hit the tumor, which was now the size of my fist, and it doubled in size. I took her to Yale New Haven Hospital, and the night before surgery, they still said, no, it couldn't possibly be cancer. The next morning, she had the tumor removed, and 3 days later, the results came back from pathology. It was
malignant.
rhabdomyosarcoma. It was in the 3rd stage.
On the left, we see Amber before the tumor became obvious. And then on the right, how old is she on the right? How long is that before she died?
She is about 4 there.
Now, you took a different tack. When the doctors said, yes, it is cancer, chemotherapy, radiation, you said what?
I said, well, I was telling you it was cancer all along. How do you expect me to believe you now? So I said, what do you recommend? They said chemotherapy and radiation. And I said, well, they can send men to the moon, but that's all there is? And they looked at me and said, yes, Mrs. Calistro, that's all there is. So I left the hospital feeling very confused, and I remembered Chad Green and Jerry and Diana and what they had gone through. And I didn't want that to happen to Amber. So I went to
You went public.
Right. I went to the local newspaper and made a public plea if there was anybody out there that knew of any alternative therapies, and hundreds of letters came back. And I spent the next month, basically, I put her on radiation because I didn't want to do nothing. And I put her on a metabolic diet and searched for a month for therapy.
Was there ever a possibility that the doctors or some attorneys would intercede on Amber's behalf, or they would say it was on Amber's behalf? Was
Well,
that
that's what I thought would happen. And as a matter of fact, when I talked to Jerry and Diana, they said, Patty, be very careful. Don't let them know that you're searching for other therapy. And the reason that I brought Amber into the public light was because I didn't want them to do anything. And I knew that if the public knew about Amber and knew that I was a sensible parent that loved Amber, that they wouldn't let them take Amber away.
Amber did die.
Yes, she did. We had decided after that month to take her down to Freeport, Grand Bahamas, to Dr. Lawrence Burton. He has an immunoaugmentative therapy. She was on that therapy for 5 months, and the therapy itself did work. As a matter of fact, I have slides that progressed the tumor, and she got tonsillitis while we were down there. So her immune system was trying to fight the tonsillitis, and the type of cancer rhabdomyosarcoma is very rapidly growing. So basically what happened was a tumor got ahead of us.
But it was your choice that this is the way, if Amber was to die from cancer, that this is the way it would be faced.
Definitely.
Let me ask both of you, because this comes back to the Baby Jane Doe thing that we were talking about earlier. Baby Jane Doe has, among other complications, spina bifida. Right. And her parents say that her life would not ever be normal. We choose to let her die. What do you think of that when you hear that?
Well, I feel that seeing the tapes that I've seen on the Baby Jane Doe case, that the parents really felt that they made the right decision. Since I'm the mother of a girl that's almost 5, I know a lot more about spina bifida, and I sometimes hear that, you know, parents don't always get the most accurate information. So I hope that parents realize that they always should get a second opinion, and no matter what the decision is, they should really, you know, research it, find parent support groups. There's a lot of resources out there, and you know, try their best to make the right decision, but, you know, to use, you know, different types of resources in order to do that.
Patty, with everything you've been through, who do you think should make the decision about a sick child? Should the parent? Should the doctor? Should the courts? Who decides if the child gets treatment?
Well, I think as it stands right now, the parents do make the decisions. I think it's a God-given right that God gave parents common sense and intuition in regards to their children, whether it be what they're going to feed them for dinner or if they're going to give them aspirin if they have a cold. So I think that the right is naturally with parents. I think that the conflict comes in when the medical establishment thinks that they're right, and they try to impose that on the parents. When all along, I think if common sense and intuition was used more, that there'd be less conflict.
Thank you both for sharing those stories. God bless you. Maureen, Patty,
thank you for having us.
We'll go over to Eileen now, who has a different perspective.
Thank you, Tim, and Maureen and Patty, for sharing your stories. And you just heard Patty discuss her feelings about who really does have the right to treatment for their child. Parents, courts, medical profession. In a moment, legal editor Arthur Miller and Channel 5's medical editor Dr. Timothy Johnson will join us to talk about the role of the courts and the medical profession when it comes to the right, life or death. We'll be right back.